Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the 10 most reliable Ark Tames, so let's get into it. In at number 10 is the Thyla, and you can always rely on a really good Thyla to make your day even better, and it is an extremely reliable creature as it is very easy to control, very easy to use, and it will always do the job that you want it to do, unless you're fighting bosses, obviously, as the Thyla is not allowed in boss arenas, which kind of does make sense. This is a really OP creature capable of so many things, but the fact that the Deinonychus is allowed in boss arenas is a kind of a bit of a shame, really, that the Thyla isn't as well, as they are pretty similar creatures when you think about it. And the Thyla is definitely a reliable one, and one which is very easy to tame as well, albeit not spawning in the nicest of Ark biomes, being in the Redwoods biome, which isn't a very kind place. But compared to some other biomes that you'll find in Ark, like the swamp even on the islands, the Redwoods is a much friendlier place. And the fact that this is a simple knockout tame, and it really isn't a difficult to figure out tame, or really a difficult tame, especially with the net gun. Obviously you don't have that on ASA, but on ASA you do, and even with a basic trap as well. They are really simple tames, really easy to tame. The only thing you have to avoid is just them pouncing on you when they're in the trees, but if you take the right precautions, these things are really easy to tame, and I can't stress that enough. And also on top of that, their saddle level isn't too high as well. They're really quick, they're really agile, they're really mobile, they can climb so many surfaces, which makes them really great reliable travel mounts. They have a great weight stat as well, which is another really useful thing for even something like a carnivore to have, especially one of this size, as you will be lugging around some gear or resources or whatever you are actually going to be lugging around or using this creature for in general. And obviously through all of that, they will still give you all of that necessary damage which you require. The Thyla is honestly an insanely great tame, one of which you should tame as soon as you can. Next up, we have the Theri, and the Theri is one of the best creatures you will find out there in Ark. Nothing can really compare to the Tickle Chicken's reliability in terms of all of its harvesting and its gathering. This creature is just so useful for so many things. The fact that it can gather loads of fiber is an absolute godsend. The fact that it can gather loads of wood and thatch and berries and loads of meat as well, as it is great at dealing loads and loads of damage. But what would you really expect from those absolutely massive claws of which it yields? The Theri is an insanely great creature for so many things, and it is reliable for everything. It is easy to control, easy to tame, albeit its taming does take a little bit longer compared to some other tames, and you wouldn't expect it to take that long for its size, but it is mainly because it is a herbivore, and herbivore tames do generally take a little bit longer. Obviously, unless you have vegetables or kibble, then it will be pretty much the same as the carnivore tames. And also its saddle is unlocked at level 69 too, which is just a nice little bonus.
Nice.
And also on top of all of that as well, the Theri is great for killing the dragon on the island, as it is a herbivore, and the dragon's fire ability deals an obscene amount of damage to carnivores, so the Theri is pretty much your best friend when it comes to that boss fight. Right, next on the list we have the UT, and the UT is one of those creatures which I will always need for any boss fight that I may be doing, unless it's the Moda, as this thing really doesn't go underwater very well. But that is not what you're going to be using this thing for. You're going to be using this to be that creature that you ride on, especially on single player when you're doing the bosses. You send your fighting creatures in, you keep the Daedon by your side, and you just use those incredible rules that it has, and it will work every time, and it is so easy. No matter your Ark skill level, the UT will be a really reliable creature for you. There is no way which you can get the UT wrong. You simply just have to press a button and it does a thing, and then 30 seconds later you press that button again and it keeps doing that thing, and your creatures are going to be even stronger. And in some cases, if you use the Fear Roar as well, it will debuff the enemy creatures, even though that doesn't really apply for bosses, as they are creatures of great size and there is a size limit on what the the Fear Roar applies to, but still a very useful thing in just general combat around the Ark map as well, especially for creatures which are smaller than the UT, which I think is around the size limit, and definitely for PvP raiders on Pteranodons. But just before we continue, make sure to hit that like button and the subscribe, as it really helps out the channel. Now, the Anki is obviously one of the most useful creatures that you will encounter in Ark, and it is by far the most reliable way to get all of that necessary metal, which is by far one of the most important resources, if not the most important resource in Ark. You're going to use that thing so much for tools, weapons, armor, structures, saddles, you name it. Metal is going to be used, and you need to gather that metal in some way. And obviously you can always use the metal pick and the metal hatchet, but the Anki is going to gather even more metal every single time with the exact same reliability every time, so you always know what to expect when gathering metal with this thing. And it is just so nice to use and so easy to use that, again, like the UT, you can't get this wrong. You press a button and then boom, absolute insane amounts of metal. And you can definitely put the Dodic in this position as well, as both of those creatures are really reliable, easy ways to get resources quick, fast and easily, and definitely creatures which you will need to use at some point, especially if you're playing solo, to get all of that progress done quickly and efficiently. And these things are definitely going to help you out on that Ark grind. Now, the Basilo is a creature which is probably the best ocean tame in Ark. There is nothing to me which really does compare to this creature in terms of its uses and reliability. This is the best creature out there for doing any kind of underwater caves, although it does have a depth limit, which is a little bit sad, but it kind of does make sense, and it adds an essence of realism to this creature as well. But the reason why it is so reliable in the ocean is mainly because of one ability which it has, which pretty much no other Ark creature has even to this day, but the Facilosuchus will have that ability. And actually, I don't even know if it's in the game at the moment. I think it is. It might be on ASA the Island. I'm not really sure, and I haven't tamed one of those yet. And the Basilo is available to all Ark players, so that is why it is on this list. It is immune to eels and jellyfish and all of those kind of creatures, which is an absolute godsend when it comes to Ark, as they are the most pesky creatures in the ocean, and there's really no way to get around them, apart from when you have that legendary Basilo, as you can simply just swim past them and they can't do anything to you. So relaxing. In at number 5 is the Barry, and this is by far the best creature out there for doing any kind of cave runs, and especially on ASA at the moment, as the island is the only real available map to the general public at the moment. Obviously Spartalfheim is there as well, but that is a little bit of a janky thing to get through, and I'll not talk about it again in this video as it is not really relevant. In terms of the Barry's abilities, like I've said, this is the best caving creature out there because of its size. It is just so good at getting into caves, and it is so reliable, as every time it will get into that cave and it will do the job you need it to do, which is to get you to that cave artifact, and then that you can retrieve it safely and get out of the cave with no deaths. First try, no issues, no problems. And obviously some of the caves, like the insect cave, you may want to use something like a Megatherium, but you'll need to use a mana of cryos, and the fact that this thing is so convenient that you can simply just walk it into the cave and then walk it out, apart from obviously that one ice cave where literally no creature will fit. It is so convenient, and it has a wealth of abilities to help you along the way as well, like its spin ability, which you may have just seen there, which can stun creatures up to the size of a Megalodon. Definitely a cool ability to have, and definitely a really reliable, insanely great caving creature. Now, there is no doubt that the Giga is built for all of that power, and the fact that this is a really reliable creature on top of that, as you can get the same power every time when using it, is insane. And you may say, what about the Carcharodontosaurus? Isn't that a more reliable, better large carnivore. But the fact is, its taming method is so buggy, and sometimes with its bleed ability, its damage will vary, so you don't know what to expect out of it every single time, and sometimes it can be a really unreliable tame, which the Giga isn't. You know how to tame it, you know what to expect, you know how many resources it will take, and then every time you use the Giga, you know how much damage it will do, and you'll know instantly where its limits are and what it is best used for. And obviously when you use it, you will know exactly every single time how it will perform and all of that, and you'll have no stress about it. And obviously you can have more, and obviously you can always add more Gigas if you need more power, but I never really need more than one unless I'm facing the Titans on extinction. Then I will definitely use more than one, as one simply isn't enough. And the only thing really to be careful for is their rage meter, as that is the only thing which is slightly unreliable about them, as if they take too much damage, they'll kick you off and simply kill you. So definitely be very careful when using the Giga, obviously. But apart from that, it is the most insane Carno you will see. In at number 3 is the Rex, and there is no doubt that the Rex is by far one of the most reliable carnivores out there. It is such a balanced tame that you always know what to expect out of a Rex, and they are so predictable when it comes to what they can do, what their health is, what their stamina is, what their weight is, and what the Rex's limits are, and that makes them an extremely useful tame. You may think all of that will make a boring tame, but actually it makes an even more useful one, as if you know everything about that creature and what it can do and what it can't do, you can utilize that creature to the fullest. Obviously, the Rex isn't going to do what the Giga or the Carcharodontosaurus can, but it can do a lot, and especially when it comes to bosses, where Gigas and Carcharodontosauruses are not allowed into the boss arenas. And especially on maps like Gen 1, the Giga is great for the Master Controller boss fight, especially with X-Rexes as well, as if you have Gen 1, you should definitely cash into those X-Rexes, as they are an even better version of the normal Rex, just with a little bit of a buffed ability, which is, I think, minus 25% in terms of damage that other creatures will deal, and plus 25% on damage reduction. So it is an extremely useful thing to have, and actually, on second thought, it may just be 125% extra in terms of damage reduction, which is good. Obviously you get that extra 25%, and it just makes that creature a little bit stronger, and it gives it the extra special edge. But the Rex is definitely a reliable one of which is really easy to tame, and it is a very simple knockout tame. Very easy and simple, and you can't really go wrong with one. In at number 2 is the Desmodus, and you may think, well, why is this creature reliable? Its taming method is actually very buggy at times, but actually I haven't found it to be very buggy in comparison to things like the Carcharodontosaurus. And if you are taming a low level from the start, it is actually a pretty easy tame to get your head around, as it is pretty much a slightly shelled out passive tame. It is just a little bit of a more complex passive tame, you could say. There's better words than what I used previously, and it's actually very simple. When you kind of get down to it, you just feed it blood bags when it picks you up, and then you tame yourself a Desmodus. Pretty simple, and you can also feed it creatures, maybe, I think, to get 100% effectiveness, or that's how you do it on the Bloodstalker. Probably, don't quote me on that one. I've never tamed one of these with 100% effectiveness, as that's not the kind of Ark player I usually am. And once tamed, you've got yourself a very reliable flyer, capable of so many things. They're so quick, they're easy to use, and they are an absolute blood bag farm, and they're really reliable for taming as well with that Sanguine Elixir. And in at number 1 is the RG. And what would you expect, really? The RG is just that tame which every single Ark player needs at some point in their journey. And I know pretty much no one, actually, literally no one that has played Ark for a decent amount of time, over 100 hours, that has not used the RG at some point. It is just one of those creatures which has to be used at some point. This thing is great for gathering metal. Obviously it doesn't gather the metal, it just transports you from A to B, and then you gather the metal, but it does have weight reduction on resources like metal, crystal, and obsidian, and its saddle acts as a little smithy too, which is actually pretty good. I'm not sure how expensive the saddle is overall. It's unlocked in the late 60s, I think, in terms of level. Don't think level 69 like the Theory, which is a little bit sad, but obviously getting that saddle as early as possible is really what you want to do with the RG, as once you have it, you can level up from your sad Pteranodon which you may have. Not that the Pteranodon is a bad tame and all, but the RG is significantly better, as it actually has good stam, it actually has good weight, and no more frustrations when it comes to metal gathering with the Pteranodon will be needed from then on once you have the RG. And obviously it can pick up a wealth of creatures as well, which is extremely useful, and when paired with the Anki, you have an absolute metal farming machine of a creature. And if you're with friends as well, you can pick up some other players too. And don't forget, if you're low on health, just quickly eat a dead corpse and you will get an insane regen buff. Definitely a reliable tame. 10 easy Ark creatures which are really good for you to tame. In at number 10 is the Carb Enemies. Now this is a great tame just when you're starting out in Ark, as it is an extremely easy one, just requiring a slingshot, and it is an extremely useful one. The Carb Enemies is really great in the early game for doing any kind of underwater exploring, as it is by far a really easy underwater tame to actually get, and is actually a pretty decent swimmer. Although it is pretty slow on land, this thing can definitely pick up the pace when it comes to jumping into the water, and it can be great for gathering things like silica pearls and oil in the early game when you do not have the skills or materials to actually tame up a fully underwater tame like the Megalodon or the Mosasaurus. The Baryonyx is also a very good shout as well if you did want to tame that creature to use as an underwater tame too, as it works extremely effectively as well. In terms of downsides for the Carb Enemies, obviously it is quite slow, and obviously its damage isn't really going to rack up, and its saddle is going to use a little bit of cementing paste, but to be honest it's not really that bad to get that, as it's only like 6 or 10 or 15 cementing paste. It isn't an extreme amount like you'll see later on in the game, where you'll really want to harvest it in some way from beaver dams or using a Beelzebufo. But you actually would be surprised in how much damage the Carb Enemies can deal. As some smaller creatures, it can definitely do a very good job of killing, and it is okay for fending off things like Dilos, Raptors and Dodos, but definitely in the damage department, lower your expectations. In at number 9 is the Bulldog, a really crucial iteration to Operations map, and definitely a very easy tame and a extremely useful one as well. Although cute on the surface and seemingly completely innocent with no use at all, the Bulldog has an extremely useful use. When its light is activated, it will have the light pet effect, and Reapers and things like Namelesses will be extremely debuffed, and I think Namelesses won't even come out of the ground when your light pet is enabled. So it's definitely a really great creature to have when you're heading into those deep dark depths of Arboration. In at number 8 is the Thyla, a tame that has been around in Ark for a while now, but definitely an extremely useful one. The Thyla is a tame found in the redwoods of pretty much any map in trees, and you should definitely be careful for them and watch out for them whenever you're in the redwoods, even if you're not trying to tame one, as if these things pounce on you, that could be the end of a very nice Ark trip for you, or a metal run when you're low-lying flying in those redwoods. So definitely be careful and always be on the lookout for these things, especially because these things are very well camouflaged. But once tamed, which can be easily done with a net trap and some darts or a simple trap, these things have the ability to scale up several walls and vertical surfaces, and also have an extremely useful ability for any carnivore to have, which is the all famous bleed ability, which works based on damage percentage instead of just actual damage. So no matter the creature's health, it will still be dealing 25-35% of that creature's health in damage, which is absolutely insane. Sadly, this doesn't all hit in one go, but to be honest, the fact that it only lasts over a 30-second period is still an extremely useful thing to have, as it is still a very quick drain of an enemy's health, and if the damage stat is good anyway and the creature's health is of reasonable level, the Thyla will have absolutely no trouble decimating through multiple Ark creatures in seconds, or bosses in minutes if it could actually go into bosses. In at number 7 is the Beelzebufo. Now overall my opinion has drastically changed on this thing over the course of my Ark playing and just my YouTube content making as well, as I would rarely ever use the Beelzebufo for anything, and I pretty much never tamed one. But over time, you the viewers of this channel has persuaded me to actually try out the Beelzebufo, and I can definitely agree this is an extremely useful tame for gathering all of that cementing paste. Yes, you finally heard me say it. I'd probably say beaver dams are still great if you're in the mid-game stages of Ark, but if you can chill out for a Beelzebufo, definitely do. And also think about breeding them as well, as then those insect runs of those insect caves or wherever you farm insects will be extremely easy and efficient, and definitely worth your time, and you'll be able to gather thousands and thousands of cementing paste. Also, the Beelzebufo is a great underwater creature as well, but to be honest, what would you expect from a literal frog? The Beelzebufo has a wealth of abilities and is an extremely useful creature for so many things. So if you've never used one before, I definitely urge you to try one out. And unlike me, you actually may really value these things in the early game Ark stages. In at number 6 is the Anki. Now obviously the Anki is an essential part of every Ark player's progress, unless you're one of those people that just stops at metal tools and doesn't bother to tame the Dodic or the Anki, and both of those creatures could be on that list, as these things, even though a knockout tame requiring a significant amount of tranks due to their damage reduction, these things aren't actually a very difficult tame, as you can tell, they run really slowly. And if you have something like an RG to pick one up and take it to a different area, or if you just pick one up and put it in a trap, or you just lead it to a trap, this can be one of Ark's easiest tames, and you don't even really have to move around, as you can just put it in a trap and then just simply shoot tranks at it, and you'll have yourself a tamed Anki. And once you have one of these things tamed, you will really enjoy it, as these things are by far one of the best creatures out there for getting all of that metal, compared to the Doedicurus, which will get you all of that stone, which is definitely very necessary, but in my opinion metal is an extremely more valuable resource, and it will gather anything that the pick does on any kind of metal or rock or tree or any of those types of resources. The Anki is really a crucial one and not actually very difficult of a tame. In at number 5 is the Deinonychus. Now, comparative to other Ark egg tames, this is actually one of the easiest ones, as the Deinonychus can very easily be your first tame on Valguero. And for good reason, as these things are very easy to actually tame, and if you have just some basic level of Ark experience, you won't really struggle with these things. You just have to be cautious and just wait and get into the right spot and the right nest at the right time, and then you should be able to escape. You'll probably want things like parachutes as well, just so you can quickly escape off of the cliffs, and then the Deinonychuses should at some point lose you. Or you could always do the strategy of just hiding behind a large creature, and then the Deinonychuses will attack that creature, and then they'll aggro together, and then they'll sort it out between themselves, and you can just go and raid that nest. But I would definitely urge you to be careful, but if you are in somewhat Ark skilled, then you will be perfectly fine with this. And even if you're new to the game, just simply watch some kind of tutorial on how to do it. Trust me, you'll not struggle with it. It isn't that bad, and after you have got the egg, it is just as simple as using torches, and you don't need to use air conditioners or anything like that. It's just a really simple, not very taxing on the resource tame, which is very good, as it deals a wealth of damage, deals bleedability to bosses, and also can traverse around the map with great speed and great agility, being able to traverse any kind of surface that you may face on any Ark map. In at number 4 is the Pteranodon. Now this is probably your first flyer that you ever flew on in Ark, unless you're one of the lucky ones that did experience another flyer, or you may have experienced something like the Pelagornis if you went for that route. But all of that back chat doesn't mean the Pteranodon is a bad creature whatsoever, and actually I would argue it is one of Ark's best flyers, as it is just so accessible from an early level, and there are barely any other flyers in Ark which actually have this kind of accessibility and speed. Its only real downsides are when it comes to weight and stamina, as it is pretty abysmal in both of those stats, and you will need to level up that weight and that stamina, And I would even urge you to go for a high level even for your first Pteranodon tame, especially if you have Tranks, which doesn't really seem very accurate for your first tame of a creature. But a low level Pteranodon stam and weight is just so bad. Sometimes it is just even completely unusable if you're carrying 10 wood on you. No, you're encumbered and overweight. Sometimes it is just so bad it is unusable and is not even worth the tame. In terms of the saddle for the Pteranodon though, it can be a bit of a pain, as that chitin and keratin can be a bit of an annoyance to actually gather up, but if you do find a pack of insects or kill a few carb enemies, you shouldn't be too bad. And at the level that you'll be unlocking the Pteranodon saddle, which is 38, you'll definitely have some sort of Ark experience, and you really won't struggle with it that much. It just may take a bit of time. In terms of the Pteranodon's PvP use, which yes, it does have one, this thing is extremely useful for raiding bases, as its C-spin attack ability, while yes, can get you across the map really fast, is really good for raiding inside bases, as it can quickly deal a lot of damage very fast. In at number 3 is the Reaper. This, like many other Ark creatures, is an Arboration tame, and is very highly valued among all of the Ark community. I know no one out there that actually hates the Reaper Queen, unless they are talking about the taming method, which apart from on Gen 2, is an absolute nightmare, unless you have a few tricks up your sleeve, like a trap, and you'll probably want a light pet as well, except for when you're doing the exact taming process, as I'm pretty sure you can't have a light pet out when getting impregnated by the Reaper Queen. And yes, I said impregnated and not tamed, as you're not going to go out and knock these things out and then just tame one. Essentially what you do is get the Reaper Queen to a really low health stat, I think it's under 1000 HP, then you go up to it, it will impregnate you, and then you just gather loads and loads of XP to get at 100% effectiveness, and then at some point there'll be a timer, and then that Reaper King baby is going to be born into the world, and it'll probably kill you, so that's why you'll need Reaper pheromone glands, which is another resource that you get, I'm pretty sure, from killing Reapers. So there is a lot of prep work that actually does go into taming a Reaper, but on Gen 2, Rajklark has a really easy tutorial for it, and it can be your first tame, which is why it is actually on this list, as you may think of the Reaper as a really difficult Ark tame, but with this new taming method that Rajklark has discovered and found himself, it is extremely easy. In at number 2 is the Maywing. This is the first Genesis Part 2 creature on the list, and the only one on the list, as the creature in the number 1 spot is not part of the Genesis Part 2 family. Now, what makes the Maywing such a good tame? And also, how easy is it to tame? And obviously, because this is an easy, great Ark Tames list, this thing is relatively easy. The Maywing is a very simple tame, just requiring a net gun or a few simple signposts, and that is all you'll need to trap it, and then just use a few tranks or a club if you feel like doing that, which I wouldn't really recommend, and then you have yourself a Maywing. And this is by far one of Ark's best creatures, and in my opinion, Ark's best travel mount. Just end all, it is just simply the best travel mount. It has so much speed, its stamina drain is near to none, and its weight is pretty decent as well, making it a very top tier travel mount, and it is extremely easy to tame. But it has many other uses as well, like being a great creature for raising up baby creatures, as it is a portable feeding trough. You can also carry baby creatures in its saddle, and it can even steal enemy baby creatures if you're doing a raid in a PvP scenario. And if you're looking for berries, this thing can gather berries too. There's pretty much nothing that the Maywing can't do. And finally, in at number 1 is the Crystal Wyvern. Now you may think Wyverns are an extremely difficult tame. Why am I putting a Crystal Wyvern in the top 10 list? As the Crystal Wyvern is an extremely easy tame compared to the Wyvern. This thing is a passive tame requiring a special kind of crystal found on Crystal Isles, and is by far one of the easiest Ark tames. It pretty much takes no effort at all. You just have to harvest the crystal, then find a Crystal Wyvern. There is a spot on its back where you can stand and then simply sit, and then just passive feed it the crystal, and then you have yourself a Wyvern. And because Wyverns have no saddle, you can access this thing at any level. Obviously you'll need the wooden pick, but that is literally the first level. And sorry, I meant stone pick there, not wooden pick. This is not Minecraft. And if you do go for the Blood Crystal Wyvern, then you have yourself an even better Wyvern. And it isn't even more difficult to tame, it is the exact same taming method for every Crystal Wyvern out there. And when you tame one, you'll be very, very glad that you did. As compared to the Pteranodon, which is a similar bracket of accessibility to the Crystal Wyvern, you have yourself a much faster tame. A tame with reasonable stamina, a tame with reasonable weight, a tame with even more damage, even though the Pteranodon's damage isn't that bad, and just overall a much, much better tame, and also a lot more of an intimidating one. The only downside it really does have is Wyverns do not have armor, but with all the better features of a Wyvern, it is significantly better. Not to mention that this thing can carry a wealth of creatures the Pteranodon can't.
And give it up for our patrons, Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Maciejewski, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member.